Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. The mother of Roger Fortson is speaking out about the murder of her son. The murderer has been fired from the sheriff's department that he was stalking for, but there haven't been any charges filed against him, even though it's obvious he's guilty as hell. Now, the murderer has been identified as Eddie Duran, a white Hispanic, so let's hear it for the Black-Brown Alliance. I'm also wondering where the Latino organizations are at to stand with the black community at this moment. Probably at the same place they were when Geronimo Yanez murdered Philandro Castile. The white media has been trying to bury this case because they can't find any dirt on the victim. This young man was a member of the military, and they don't have any sort of dirt that they can find on the guy. Every picture of him shows him in his military uniform. Yeah, not the kind of optics that the white media likes. They need some dirt on this young man, and they can't find any at all. See, this is how it is whenever the victim's black and they can't find a way to dirty them up. They try to drop the story or suppress it, bury it, pretend that they forgot all about it. Even the Aryan propagandists couldn't put a spin on it. They tried to, though. They had to report that this murderer didn't identify himself, and that he shot Mr. Fortson first, and then said drop the gun afterwards. But even so, there are some members of the white media trying to hold the line nonetheless. USA Today did a story on this, and they told a version that left out half the facts. They claimed that the killer knocked on the victim's door and announced that he was with the sheriff's office. Now, that's not how it happened at all, and the body camera shows that. It's not even in doubt. The killer did not announce himself when he first started banging on the door. He began pounding on the door first and didn't announce himself at all. It was only after Mr. Fortson didn't answer that he later said that he was with the sheriff's office. But by then, any reasonable person would be suspicious that this wasn't the police, and the killer also covered the peephole to the door so Mr. Fortson couldn't see who it was. The killer only stopped blocking the peephole when he stepped to the side out of view of anyone who might be looking through the peephole, so this was not the behavior of legitimate law enforcement. This is what criminals do when they're trying to set up a home invasion, which is what this actually was. Also, USA Today claimed that the killer told Mr. Fortson to step back, then shot him. But the reality was he said it as he was firing at Mr. Fortson. And he also didn't say to drop the gun until after Mr. Fortson had been shot and lay dying on the ground, but USA Today left that little detail out. So the white media is acting like the white media. The only way that they can even remotely try to defend this murder is by leaving out half the things that the killer did in the course of the kill. And that's the white media's purpose, to be the PR wing for the thugs in blue. But even so, even in death, Mr. Fortson isn't making it easy for them. And you know that this creep Duran is dirty as hell, like all the other cops. The white media tries to act like they don't have any citizen complaints against him, and like his service record squeaky clean. They do that with all the cops whenever they murder a black person. And then we find out later that they predictably had tons of citizens' complaints, and that the department knew all about them, and had they been punished, they could have been stopped long before they murdered someone. It's like Daniel Pentalio after he strangled Eric Garner to death. The white media tried to pretend as if this guy's record was squeaky clean. Oh, there's nothing to see here. And then it comes out later that he had been successfully sued twice for racial profiling and police brutality. This before he murdered Eric Garner. But the white media decided to downplay that. Derek Chauvin, of course, had been putting his knee on black people long before George Floyd. He had done this before, but the white media suppressed that too. Now, the sheriff's office down there has released their internal affairs investigative report about Duran, and you notice that it didn't take them years to do this. It took days, not years. So, as usual, whenever the police lie and claim that, oh, this cop shot a black person, well, the investigation could take years to be resolved, that's because they're trying to bury the case. They're hoping it will go away. They want the headlines to go away so that they can go ahead and let the killer walk. And in this case, the Internal Affairs report simply stated the obvious, that Mr. Fortson didn't make any furtive or overt move or any other kind of gesture that would warrant murdering him. The usual lies that the police always tell during one of these incidents. Oh, well, the nigger made a furtive gesture. He made an overt move. Now, you can't do it in this case, because it's all on video. And just to show that these white supremacists never update their playbook, Duran was trying to rehash the old talking points about being afraid for his life. I was scared. I was afraid I was going to die. And then, of course, the big bad black man, he was a demon. Ain't that what they said about Mike Brown? This black man, as soon as I saw him, it was like I was looking at the devil. He said that this young military soldier apparently had aggression in his eyes. Maybe because you're banging on his door without announcing yourself. But he was trying to do all that stuff, trying to see if he could resurrect the old lie about, see, I was scared for my life. That's my get out of jail free card, right? He's still trying to do it at this late date. The Internal Affairs report also concluded that the murderer's use of force wasn't reasonable. See, when Florida made it legal to carry a gun anywhere, anytime, they also made it harder for the thugs in blue to automatically claim so-and-so had a gun. Well, that's not illegal. And it's not supposed to be unusual either. It took away a lot of the police's excuses because that's what the law is now. Though, of course, with the white media's help, they do try to act as if this law doesn't apply to black people. Well, there's an exception where black people are concerned. Mr. Fortson's mother is doing the right thing. She's calling out the authorities and telling them she sees what they're trying to do and that she's not fooled. She's not accepting any bones being thrown to her. She wants the animal who murdered her son to be charged with the crime that he committed. She says take his credentials, take his pension, yeah, and take his freedom too. It's still early days, but it reminds me of the parents of Ahmaud Arbery. A large part of holding the bastards accountable comes down to how much pressure the families put forward. The responsibility to make sure that these atrocities aren't allowed to just fade from the headlines rests principally, not exclusively, but principally with the families of the deceased. It is their responsibility to make sure that they bang the drum and keep the names of their loved ones alive and make sure that the white media isn't allowed to just let this die a natural death. When Tatiana Jefferson was murdered, her mother's side of the family started buck dancing, but her father, even in his terminal condition, even while the man was dying, he stayed on code. And he specifically said he didn't want any hugs from the criminal who murdered his daughter. He, of course, was specifically referencing the brother of Botham Jean and his shameful display in court. So it's good to see that there are still some black folks who understand exactly what needs to be said. Let us hope that the mother of Mr. Fortson remains consistent with this. And by the way, of course, Benjamin Crump, he's always sniffing around. Florida happens to be his home base, so you knew that this dude wouldn't be far behind. You know, my gut tells me that Mushmouth is going to try some sort of half-brained run for political office at some point in the not-too-distant future. His buddy Sleaze Merritt tried it in Texas and failed spectacularly. And since mediocre minds think alike, it's fully in the cards that Crump just might try the same thing at some point. All right, so now we go from the oppressed to the opportunistic. Fani Willis. Word around the campfire is that the good old boys down in Georgia have gotten on code, or at least they're trying to, and they put the brakes on Fani's case against Trump. Not because of anything having to do with the trial itself, but actually because of her, at least she's the target. Georgia's appeals court said that they want to evaluate whether Fani Willis should be disqualified from handling this case. And it's expected that they're not going to be able to make any sort of determination on that until March of next year. Well after the election, what a surprise. And this action follows closely on what was basically a trial in all but name of Fani Willis, talking about her personal life with one of her subordinates. Was there money that changed hands or was there not? Oh yeah, they're raking her over the coals. As far as they're concerned, try to dirty her up. Yeah, they couldn't stop her from getting reelected, but who knows? Maybe they can trample any other sort of political ambitions she has for the future. And where are the white leftists who pretended to be so in love with her? Shouldn't they be doing a full court press to protect her? But they're not. Yeah, because even while they're supposed to be at war with the white right, they still understand that they don't want to set the precedent that they're supposed to be coming to the aid of their bootlicks. No matter what phony, insincere praise they may pretend to give these bootlicks in their white media, the reality is, times like this, they're on their own. And because nothing happens in a vacuum under white supremacy, down in Florida, the federal judge presiding over that missing documents case at Mar-a-Lago, she was appointed by Trump, and she's proving that she was worth every penny she paid to get the job. Trump made sure that when he appointed federal judges, he chose the most corrupt and sniveling suck-up he could to be in charge of the district where he lives. And this woman's sitting here saying that basically we need to be kicking the can down the road. Not so fast. Oh, I got a whole lot of case law on this I need to read up on. Aren't we going a little bit too fast? That's what she's saying. This woman isn't a judge. When Trump appointed her to the federal bench, he put her there as his insurance policy against any sort of conviction at the federal level, and so far she's paying off. She's not the brightest bulb, but then again she doesn't have to be, because a large part of her job comes down to her own indiscretion. And speaking of indiscreet, I can't really get into the Trump trials because we have our own interests that need attention. Alvin Bragg showed more gumption going after a former president than he did going after a lone lunatic racist punk like Mia Ponsetto. And why would that be the case? Because he was terrified at even the prospect of taking her to court. He couldn't dismiss that case soon enough. And why is that? Because that was a case about punishing an anti-black racist for an anti-black race attack. And he knows that the dominant society, the people who funded his DA campaign, he knows that they don't like the idea of him actually criminalizing anti-black violence. And if he wants their support for any of his future political campaigns, when he tries to run for governor, say, he knows he needs their support, and that being the case, they engage in the exact same types of anti-black racism, and he wants to make it clear, hands off that, I will maintain the hands-off policy for anti-black violence. This is the Alvin Bragg who the left corner of the white media tries to laud these days, and, oh, how wonderful you did that, please. You got these clowns, they each got their own little personal axes to grind with one another, and as far as they're concerned, Alvin Bragg is a useful idiot, but an idiot nonetheless. Trump made himself into a sanctioned target. He wasn't one originally, but of course, his behavior and his actions and his antics changed that. So it's okay for Alvin Bragg to go after him because at least half the political machine is fine with it, and the other half is, at worst, ambivalent. These black prosecutors who the left side of the white media is trying to hype up, they need to be pursuing actual justice and putting cases on the people who attack us. But then again, we didn't choose Fani Willis to be DA, white power did. We didn't choose Alvin Bragg either. White power found this chump and put him in office. So these bootlicks are following the whims of their masters. But family, don't let anyone take your eye off the ball. This jockeying for position that the powerful are doing, that's only relevant to them. That's how they arrange the deck chairs. It suits their purposes, not ours. While I'm no fan of Trump, and I sure hope you aren't either, the reality is that what's going on with the family of Roger Fortson is far more relevant to us than what's going on with Trump. That prosecutorial circus is nothing more than a political sideshow. But I'm not paying attention, because no matter which one of them wins, we still lose. That is, if we're silly enough to keep playing the game. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Cyberdyne 100, Mark Anderson, Black Voltron Reloaded, Ginger Vine, and Swole Money. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.